Welcome to Headline Hub Updates. Subscribe and press the bell icon for more updates. On August 20th, 2025, Washington, D.C. awoke to a tense, expectant silence. The city, usually bustling with the hum of politics and power, felt unusually still. Even the air seemed to carry a sense of anticipation, as if the entire nation was holding its breath, waiting for history to unfold. The Supreme Court, shrouded in early morning shadows and ringed with security, was set to announce a decision that would ripple across the nation and far beyond the city's marble columns. News crews and analysts from every major network braced for a ruling that could redefine presidential power. Cameras rolled, microphones were checked, and experts whispered predictions, knowing that whatever happened next would be dissected for years. The case, U.S. steel imports versus United States, centered on President Trump's sweeping use of tariffs under the banner of national security. At stake was not just the price of steel, but the very limits of executive authority in matters of trade and national interest. Trump's supporters saw tariffs as vital protection for American jobs and industries, a shield against foreign competition. Critics, however, called them an abuse of power, warning that unchecked authority could set a dangerous precedent for future presidents. At exactly 10 a.m., the news broke, flashing across screens and echoing through the halls of power. The Supreme Court ruled 6-3 against the administration, sending shockwaves through Washington and the rest of the country. The court declared the president's broad use of national security to justify tariffs unconstitutional, reaffirming that Congress, not the executive, holds primary power over international trade. The decision was clear. The balance of power must be preserved. The city erupted. Phones rang off the hook. Aides rushed through marble corridors, and trading floors buzzed with uncertainty. Lawmakers scrambled to respond, while investors tried to make sense of the new economic reality. For a steelworker in Ohio, the future was suddenly unclear. Years of policy could be reversed, and jobs once protected now seemed at risk. The sense of security that tariffs had offered was replaced by anxiety and doubt. For a farmer in Iowa, hope flickered. Lower tariffs could mean cheaper equipment and new markets for crops, a chance to recover from years of trade wars and uncertainty. Small business owners across the country saw a possible lifeline as the cost of imports might fall, offering relief from rising expenses and the promise of renewed growth. The ruling didn't just settle a legal question. It redrew the nation's economic and political landscape. The boundaries of presidential power had been tested, and the outcome would shape debates for generations. The shock was immediate, and the consequences were only beginning to unfold. Across living rooms and boardrooms, Americans wondered what this new chapter would mean for their lives and livelihoods. Washington and the country held its breath as a new era began. The city's skyline, bathed in the fading light, seemed to reflect the uncertainty and possibility of the moment. The aftershocks would be felt for years to come, as lawmakers, businesses, and ordinary citizens adjusted to a world forever changed by a single decision. The Supreme Court's decision marked a turning point in American governance. The majority opinion made clear, the president's power over trade is not unlimited. The court found that using national security as a catch-all justification for tariffs stretched the law beyond its intent. This ruling reasserted Congress's constitutional authority over commerce, acting as a reset on executive overreach. It sent a message: major economic policies must be debated and approved by Congress, not imposed by a single leader. The decision promised more stability for businesses and consumers, and a return to checks and balances. The landscape of American power had been fundamentally reshaped. The ruling triggered immediate, polarized reactions across the country, with emotions running high on both sides of the debate. Outside government buildings, crowds gathered, some cheering, others voicing their anger and concern. In public spaces, people watched the news unfold, realizing that the decision would have far-reaching consequences for their daily lives and the nation's future. In Congress, leaders from both parties hailed the decision as a victory for constitutional order, emphasizing the importance of checks and balances. Lawmakers spoke to the press, highlighting how the ruling reaffirmed the role of the legislative branch in shaping trade policy and protecting democratic principles. Business leaders and farmers, long battered by tariffs and trade wars, celebrated the promise of stability and renewed markets. For many, the decision signaled hope for expanded exports, fewer trade barriers, and a return to predictable economic conditions. Small business owners and agricultural producers expressed optimism about rebuilding relationships with international partners. The CEO of a major automaker praised the clarity and certainty the ruling brought, stating that it would allow companies to plan for the future and invest in innovation. Industry leaders echoed these sentiments, noting that clear rules are essential for growth and competitiveness in a global market. But supporters of Trump's tariffs, especially in steel and manufacturing, felt betrayed, fearing job losses and renewed foreign competition. Many workers worried that the removal of tariffs would make it harder for American industries to compete, putting their livelihoods at risk and threatening entire communities dependent on manufacturing. Union leaders warned of risks to American industry, while workers braced for uncertainty. They called for new protections and urged Congress to consider the needs of working families as the debate moved forward, emphasizing the importance of fair trade policies that support domestic jobs. International allies welcomed the decision as a step toward normalizing trade relations. Diplomats expressed hope that the United States would re-engage with global partners, rebuild trust, and work collaboratively to address shared economic challenges. Yet, the debate over trade was far from over. The battleground simply shifted from the White House to Congress. Lawmakers prepared for intense negotiations, with both sides determined to shape the future of American trade policy. The world watched as America's internal struggle over trade policy entered a new phase. International media covered every development, and foreign citizens followed the story closely, knowing that U.S. decisions would impact economies around the globe. The Supreme Court's decision had set the stage for a fierce legislative fight. As lawmakers debated, the nation and the world waited to see what direction America's trade future would take, aware that the outcome would shape global commerce for years to come. The ruling capped decades of shifting power over trade. The Constitution gives Congress authority over commerce, but after World War II, Congress delegated much of this power to the president for efficiency. Laws like the Trade Expansion Act allowed presidents to act quickly, but with limits. Section 232, meant for true national security threats, was rarely used, until Trump applied it broadly to allies and common goods. The court's decision reversed this trend, narrowing the president's authority and returning power to Congress. The era of the president as sole trade warrior was over. Major trade actions would now require negotiation between the White House and Capitol Hill. America's economic destiny was back in Congress's hands. The tariff debate is as old as America itself. Protectionists argue tariffs defend jobs and industries. Free traders say they raise costs and hurt consumers. Steelworkers and manufacturers saw tariffs as lifelines, while farmers and import-dependent businesses suffered from retaliation and higher prices. The Supreme Court's decision reignited this fundamental debate. For some, it was a loss of protection. For others, a chance for open markets and renewed prosperity. The true price of protection and of free trade remained at the heart of the national conversation. The White House responded with fury. President Trump denounced the ruling on social media, calling it a betrayal of American workers. In a fiery Rose Garden speech, he vowed to fight back and protect U.S. industry by any means. His supporters rallied in manufacturing towns, protesting what they saw as an elite attack on working Americans. Meanwhile, farmers and business groups celebrated, urging Congress to restore trade relationships. The decision deepened political divides, turning a legal judgment into a rallying cry for both sides. The fallout was immediate, emotional, and nationwide. The battle over America's economic future had only intensified. Financial markets erupted as the decision hit. Stocks of companies hurt by tariffs soared, while steel and aluminum producers plunged. The market's initial euphoria gave way to volatility as investors weighed the fallout. Steel futures dropped, signaling cheaper imports ahead. Construction firms cheered, but domestic mills braced for layoffs. The ruling created instant winners and losers across industries. Economists predicted lower prices for consumers, easing inflation. For workers in protected sectors, the threat of job losses loomed. The market's wild swings reflected the profound economic shifts underway. The Supreme Court's decision was more than legal theory. It was real, immediate change. The nation's economic landscape was being redrawn in real time. The Supreme Court's decision was a lesson in American civics. It reaffirmed the separation of powers. Congress makes trade law, the president enforces, and the court interprets. The tariff saga exposed the dangers of unchecked executive power. By striking down the administration's broad use of tariffs, the court restored balance. The decision forced a national conversation about the roles of each branch. It reminded Americans that slow, deliberate debate is a safeguard, not a flaw. The system's self-correction was on full display. The constitutional reckoning was both a warning and a reassurance. The decision's impact reached far beyond U.S. borders, sending ripples through the global economic landscape. It was a moment that captured the attention of nations worldwide as they pondered the implications for their own economies and trade relationships. Allies welcomed the ruling as a return to predictable, rules-based trade. This decision was seen as a beacon of stability in an often turbulent global market, offering hope for a more balanced and fair trading environment. Leaders in Europe, Canada, and Asia hoped for renewed cooperation and the end of damaging tariffs. They envisioned a future where collaboration could flourish, fostering economic growth and mutual prosperity. America's rivals, meanwhile, painted the decision as a sign of internal weakness. They speculated on the potential vulnerabilities this might expose, questioning the stability of U.S. leadership on the world stage. Yet, the world saw a nation governed by law, not by the whims of one leader. This was a testament to the enduring strength of democratic institutions, showcasing the power of checks and balances. U.S. trade policy would now be shaped by congressional debate, not presidential decree. This shift promised a more inclusive approach, where diverse voices could contribute to shaping the future of international trade. The ruling signaled a shift to more deliberate, stable global engagement. It was a call for thoughtful diplomacy and strategic partnerships, aiming to build a more interconnected and resilient global economy. America's role in the world economy was being redefined. This was a pivotal moment as the nation sought to balance its interests with those of its global partners, ensuring sustainable growth for all. The new chapter in global trade would be written not by one man, but by the dynamic interplay of democracy. It was a narrative of collaboration, innovation, and shared vision, promising a brighter future for global commerce. The world was watching as America's constitutional system proved its resilience. This was a moment of reflection and anticipation as nations awaited the unfolding of this new era in global trade.